Welcome, everyone, to our National Caregiver Day event. We are so pleased to have you all joining us to celebrate the invaluable contributions that caregivers make to our communities and healthcare systems, and to learn more about building social connection. My name is Katie Muirhead, and I'm going to be your moderator for this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the lands that we're on today. While we meet on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. I'm joining you from the city of St. Catharines, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples. If you'd like to learn more about the lands that you're joining from, you can find out more at native-land.ca. To start things off tonight, I am so pleased to share the winner of this year's Janet Bede Impact Award. This is the second year OCO is awarding a caregiver with the Janet Bede Impact Award. For those who may not know Janet, she authored Expanding Caregiver Support in Ontario, a report submitted to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care in 2017, outlining the needs of caregivers and suggesting an approach to support caregivers across the province. In fact, OCO exists because of her leadership and her compassion and dedication to supporting Ontario's caregivers. This year, we received 19 nominations. We are humbled by the efforts of so many different nominators who took the time to consider who they wanted to nominate and why. And a particular thank you for anyone here tonight who participated in the process and submitted a nomination. The selection committee considered each nomination carefully. We looked at the activities and principles that guided Janet Bede's original work. We looked at awareness and how nominees were raising awareness of caregiver issues. We looked at solutions and how caregivers were part of generating solutions that would make a difference with and for caregivers. We wanted to consider people who had a bias to action. We wanted to see evidence of collaboration because we know we can't do this alone, and we wanted a champion, someone who's a champion of caregiving issues, just as Janet has been and continues to be. And we wanted someone who's making an impact across health and social care. So with those values in mind, we're excited to announce that the 2026 award recipient is Bryna Ludwig-Prout. Bryna received 2 nominations, and unfortunately she was unable to join us tonight, but I'm so pleased to give you just a bit of background on her story and her impact. When Bryna became the primary caregiver for her husband, she essentially moved into Bridgepoint Hospital during his rehabilitation, where she made a deliberate choice to be the most effective volunteer she can be to drive attention and action towards the essential role of caregivers in healthcare. During her husband's complex rehabilitation, Bryna experienced firsthand how healthcare systems fail to recognize caregivers as essential partners. As chair of Bridgepoint's Patient and Family Advisory Council, she co-led the Changing Care program, which created Ontario's first comprehensive caregiver-friendly hospital model. She became Caregiver 001, establishing formal caregiver recognition protocols now being scaled across the province. I cannot possibly cover all that Bryna has achieved tonight, but I wanted to share something from one of the testimonials received, and then we're going to play a short video for you. A member of the leadership team from Sinai Health said this about Bryna. From the very beginning, Bryna showed us what true partnership looks like. As one of our first family caregivers, she did far more than share her experience. She helped reshape how we think, listen, and act. Her generosity with her time, her honesty in her insights, and her unwavering compassion for both patients and staff challenged us to become a more human, more responsive organization. She taught us that inviting families to the table is not an obligation, but a privilege and a source of wisdom. Through her leadership and selfless advocacy, patients and families are no longer voices on the margins, but partners at the center of our care. We are better and more courageous in our compassion because of her. Here's a short video of Bryna and OCO CEO Amy Kupal.
Bryna, I am so glad that you are here and so excited that you have been selected as the winner of the Janet Bede Impact Award.
Thank you so much. I cannot tell you what this means to me.
When you were nominated, there were some things that really struck us, and I want to share just 2 points with you to hear your thoughts and reactions. So first is this quote: Bryna challenges systems while building bridges, ensuring diverse voices aren't just heard, but shape solutions. Working with Bryna, you witnessed someone changing healthcare itself. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
One of the things that I really feel an obligation about is representing those caregivers who don't have the same kind of voice. So many people that I see in hospitals or in long-term care or whatever don't speak English, come from countries where challenging authority is not an okay thing to do. People of all different backgrounds need to work with people of all different backgrounds. I try to advocate that the system changes so that their roles are easier.
Tell us why it's so important that caregivers are recognized in the care team and connected with the support that they need.
The caregiver probably knows that person even more than they know themselves. When people are doing testing, they may pass the tests because they're, standardized tests. But the caregiver is going to know that, well, yeah, but that person is diminished from where they were. That is not where they were before. So that's one thing. Because the caregiver is carrying out the implementation plans, if they don't know what the issues are, how can they possibly follow them up, right? Thirdly, sometimes there are issues that you need to talk to the doctor about without your patient being there, because they may have resistance to it or they may not understand it or whatever, and you have to get that message across. So if you don't build those relationships with caregivers, you are sub-optimizing that patient's care.
You've been described as embodying something called network weave, a network weave philosophy with respect to your collaborative approach, connecting partners to enable integrated solutions that address root causes, not just symptoms. Tell us about that.
I got to speak with doctors, and I got to work on safety and quality committees, and I got to do panel interviews to hire people, and I got to work with essential care partners. But I want to introduce people to each other so that they can create better things. I just am a firm believer in integrated solutions. So when you know something and I know a little bit different and someone else knows something, when we get together, we can just move things forward very quickly. So I'm really honored that that was a comment.
We know that we can't do these things alone. And so I'm wondering if you can just talk with us a little bit about the importance of collaboration and what you think that has meant around the positive outcomes that you've seen over time.
It's quite a solitary role, being a caregiver, right? People can't help you in the same way in the moment as, like, if you're in the hospital, they can, but when you're at home, it's much harder. So I like people to know that they're not alone, and that someone who has been doing this as long as I have still has those doubts and still has those moments and still pushes through, because I just don't want people to feel alone.
So let's talk a little bit about that process of change over time.
When my husband was in a rehab hospital, he had a major second stroke. I went into the hospital and said, "Get me a bed, I'm not leaving." It just so happened that the Change Foundation was working at Bridgepoint Hospital with a bunch of community groups to build the family presence policy. They said, you're someone who seems like you understand the system a little bit, because this was his second stroke. And we were wondering if you would join the steering committee. Then we implemented the family presence policy, and I was actually caregiver 001, which I am just incredibly proud of. We did physician education online at just about what are the benefits to including the caregivers, what are the economic impacts of caregivers. We are not talking about the ABCs of including caregivers anymore. What we're seeing now and the programs that we're seeing and how this is being built into primary care and long-term care it's massive.
I have the privilege of knowing Janet Bede, and I have the privilege of knowing you. Janet is one of those people who just always works from the assumption that something can be done, even if it seems like there's barriers or all sorts of reasons why people could say it's impossible. And you share that outlook. This award is so well deserved for you. You've been doing this when you have had so many other caregiving responsibilities on your plate. And it's wonderful to celebrate your contributions and also your accomplishments, and to show that when you do get involved, when you share your lived experience, when you are focused on the solutions and the change that's necessary, good things can happen. And so I really appreciate all of your efforts, your continued efforts, and congratulations again on this well-deserved recognition.
Thank you so much. It means the world to me. It really does. Thank you, Amy.
Congratulations, Bryna. If this has sparked an idea for you of a caregiver that you would like to nominate for our next Janet Bede Impact Award, subscribe to our newsletter to get up-to-date information on all things happening at OCO. We'll open nominations for next year's award later this winter. For the remainder of our time together this evening, I am so pleased to introduce our special presentation with our guest from GenWell, Canada's Human Connection Movement. Tonight, we have Bobby Breckenridge joining us, who's the Director of Programming for Seniors and Communities at GenWell. Bobby is an innovative social worker and health coach with over a decade of experience in community development and holistic wellness. Bobby's going to spend some time with us tonight, sharing low-barrier practical tips and ideas to help busy caregivers build social connections. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you all so much for being here. I feel so honored to be with you here tonight to celebrate you and everyone and all the work that you're doing. It feels so special to celebrate the caregivers who are showing up every single day to support the people they love, often while juggling work, family responsibilities, and your own health. I know quite a few caregivers who are near and dear to my heart, and so this feels really personal for me. Especially, as we saw in the video, knowing that you all are the ones who are often managing the medical appointments, providing the emotional support, making those tough decisions, and often doing it all while feeling like you're carrying the weight alone, which Bryna was really sharing in that video. But here's the hopeful part that I really want to focus on tonight, is the fact that connection can support you to be healthy, well, and can really change everything you're doing, because research actually shows that when caregivers have even small, regular touch points with other people, it doesn't just ease that sense of loneliness and emotional weight, but it can actually give you more energy to show up for your care recipient, protect your own physical and mental health, and help remind you of who you are beyond your caregiving duties. And the reality is we may not be able to change everything that happens in life, but as we saw from that video, each of us really does have the power to build the support we need and to help shape the future of caregiving in Ontario. And we know that these small ways that we choose to show up in connection, whether that's just calling a friend or joining an OCO program where you feel like people really understand what you're going through, is how we move from that sense of isolation to belonging. And it really does happen one conversation, one check-in, and one genuine moment of connection at a time. So tonight, we're really going to explore why connection is non-negotiable for your health and share those practical, realistic ways to build your connection even when you're in the thick of caregiving. And my hope is that you walk out of here tonight feeling three things. Number one, really proud of the real difference you're making in people's lives, even on the hardest days. Number two, connected to everyone else in this room who really understands what you're navigating. And number three, more empowered with those concrete, easy strategies to help strengthen your support network and protect your own well-being while you do this work, because your self-care and your wellness matter too. So let's dive in. So I think it's really important that we chat about connection and how important it is for our health and well-being, because the World Health Organization has actually officially recognized loneliness as a global public health crisis, affecting people across all ages, incomes, and life circumstances worldwide. And the numbers in Canada are really backing this up. We know that right now in Canada, 52% of people are feeling lonely on a weekly basis. About 13% of people are experiencing chronic or persistent loneliness, which is just over 5 million people. And for caregivers, we know that this issue runs even deeper. Right now, we know that 4.2 million people in Ontario are caregivers, and about 46% of them feel lonely or isolated right now. 68% feel like they've hit their breaking point in the last year, and about 72% feel like they're struggling to maintain their own health because of caregiving demands. And I share this because I really want to acknowledge that these feelings you might be feeling, of feeling overwhelmed and isolated and maybe lonely, aren't signs that you're failing or that something is broken or wrong. It's really just a sign that shows how much you're giving and how much care you're providing, often without fully receiving the same level of support that you might feel like you need right now. Especially knowing that you are often navigating things like time and energy constraints that might leave little room for actually feeling like you have the energy to connect with other people. Managing that sense of the emotional weight, like the guilt, the fear, and the frustration that can come up with caregiving. Sometimes not feeling understood by the people around you or grasping what this journey kind of has been like for you. And also feeling sometimes like the social supports and the networks you used to have might be shrinking a bit because of the level of responsibility that you're holding. And so I really want you to know that you're not experiencing this alone. It is something that's impacting, not just all the caregivers in Ontario, but absolutely everyone in Canada. Because we know that about 60% of people right now are feeling deeply disconnected from their communities and also feeling profoundly lonely. So I want you to recognize that what you're experiencing right now is part of a global epidemic that's actually affecting your neighbors, your friends, your family members, the young people in your life, literally everyone. Which means that the connections that we have and that we choose to foster don't just change your life, but actually create a ripple effect for everyone involved. Because by choosing to stay connected to yourself and the people around you, you really are helping to maintain and rebuild that social fabric that has been fraying in our society. And that's powerful. Again, even if it's something as simple as sending your friend a meme, all those small moments of connection really do add up to changed health and wellness for everyone. And we know that that matters because research is actually now showing us that a lack of connection is actually worse for our health than things like air pollution, obesity, not working out, drinking, and even smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Which is why, again, it's so important that we chat about this, because we know that social connection is one of the best things we can do to really boost our physical and our mental health. So let's go ahead and chat a little bit more about what connection is. Not its simplest, it's really just the meaningful exchange that happens between people who are paying attention to one another. Now, this can show up in nonverbal ways like smiling at someone, nodding our head, using a warm tone of voice, or through shared conversation. But true connection goes so much deeper than just the ways that we're communicating with one another. It's really about that emotional experience that we create. And as Brene Brown puts it, it's really the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, and when they derive sustenance and strength from their relationships. And that's really the heart of it, is really giving and receiving that genuine sense of presence and belonging with someone where we do feel seen, heard, and valued for who we are, and we can provide that to someone else as well. So let's take a quick look at the many benefits of getting connected. First and foremost, we actually know it's the single largest indicator of happiness in our lives, and this comes out of an 80-year Harvard study done by Dr. Waldinger, where he essentially discovered that the thing that makes people happiest throughout the course of their lives is their relationships. We also know that it increases your chances of living longer by up to 50%, and that is largely due to the fact that it actually helps to strengthen your immune system, reduce stress, inflammation, and pain symptoms in the body, as well as promote and boost brain health. We also know that it boosts mental health and reduces feelings of depression and anxiety, which I know can be a big issue for caregivers especially. Next up, we actually know that it really helps to improve your security net by providing you with additional resources and allowing people to kind of cope better through major life transitions or moments of struggle. It increases your self-confidence and resiliency by providing you with the social network that you need in order to feel like you can navigate life's challenges more effectively. It actually helps to improve recovery time from illness and accidents, which is amazing. And finally, it actually helps to increase empathy, compassion, and trust, which creates safer, more inclusive communities for us all. So as I said, truly one of the most beneficial ways that we can be supporting our physical and mental health, as well as our communities overall. So with that, let's quickly chat a little bit about our social health, and then we're going to talk about some practical ways that we can gently build more social connection into our lives while we're managing the busyness of taking care of other people. So our social health is really just our ability to build and maintain meaningful relationships in our lives. And when we look at building good social health, we want to look at 4 key factors. Number 1, we want to look at the number and different types of relationships we have, because we know that having a diverse number of people around us, whether that's our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, our family, people we volunteer with, all of that diversity helps create strong social circles. Number 2, we want to look at the frequency of our interactions, or how often we're actually getting connected, especially with those people that feel like they fill our own cup up and really nourish us. Number 3, this one's really important. We want to look at our perceived quality of relationships with other people. How actually happy do we feel in those relationships? Do we feel like our needs are being met? Because that's a really important piece. And research has shown that quality over quantity matters a lot. So even if you just have a couple really close people around you, it's better than having, sometimes lots of acquaintances. And then finally, we want to look at our social skills, how comfortable we feel communicating with other people and navigating different social situations in our lives. So now we're going to go through and talk about where we can build more social support and really build up that social circle. And that really starts with ourselves. Because when you prioritize connecting with yourself, we know that everything shifts. Research actually shows that cultivating self-awareness, self-compassion, And particularly really understanding and remembering who you are beyond the caregiving duties, what you need as a person, and treating yourself with that kindness creates measurable changes. We know that stress and burnout actually drops by 15 to 25%. Loneliness actually decreases by about 22%. And interestingly enough, our social connections naturally increase. Physical health also improves when we prioritize understanding our own needs. So just always remember that connecting with yourself isn't selfish. It's really the foundation for resilience, for health, and your ability to maintain those relationships in your life without burning out. So some simple tips to connect when you are short on time. Number one, if you have 2 minutes, literally a very simple practice is to just notice what you're feeling in the moment without judgment. Take a pause for a minute, name it out loud, and literally that's it. That's connection with yourself, just coming back to that mindful moment of noticing how you're feeling, not judging yourself for it, and letting that feeling be there. Next, if you have 5 minutes, one practice I really love to recommend is just journaling on 3 simple questions. The first one is, what is one thing that you are grateful for yourself for? What are you doing really well? So one thing you're really grateful for, one thing you did really well today, and one thing that you need right now. Because that simple self-reflection builds that capacity for that awareness and that reminder of how important it is to take care of yourself. And then if you have 10 to 30 minutes, really just remembering to do something that reminds you of who you are beyond the caregiving, whether that's a hobby you love, a walk, listening to music, or just calling up an old friend. Next up is the power of family. As a caregiver, you may find that your birth family might not always be able to offer you the specific support and understanding that you're desiring in that moment, and that's totally okay, because we know that it can be a really complex situation sometimes, and family members may want to help but may not always grasp what's going on or may not know how to help. So the good news is that family can still really be a source of connection and care, even if it looks different than how it used to. Because we know that family traditions, time together, and bonding moments may need to change or shift a bit during this time, but they can still provide that solid foundation of support. So some tips to connect with family is, number one, to just set realistic expectations. It can be really helpful to just be honest with your family right now around what you can and can't do. So instead of waiting for them to maybe understand, just communicating your constraints as simple as like, I can't do long visits right now, but I would love to have a 15-minute phone call every Sunday. Because we know right now that those small, consistent touch points are bigger and matter more than those big gestures sometimes. Number two is to find ways to connect that actually work for your caregiving reality. Whether that's, inviting family to join activities you're already doing, like maybe you're meal prepping, you take a walk once a week, whatever those things you're already doing are, seeing if you can incorporate them into that piece. And then number three is to really lead with vulnerability and be honest about how you're really doing. Family members might not often reach out because they might assume that you're managing just fine, or they might not know how to help. And so when you name what you're actually experiencing and sometimes make a concrete ask, it really gives them permission to show up in that way and support you. Next up is the power of friends. Obviously, we know that our friends are some of the most meaningful relationships in our lives, and yet as caregivers, research has shown that, we often spend far less time with our friends than we need. But research actually also shows that caregivers with close friendships experience significantly lower loneliness. And the best part is, again, it doesn't need to be these like deep life chats or these, long moments. It can really just be these casual chats with friends that cut loneliness more effectively than you'd think and kind of offer that sense of refreshment and mental break from your responsibilities. So, investing in these small moments with your friends isn't just nice, it's one of the most powerful evidence-based things you can do for your health, resilience, and well-being as a caregiver. And I'll share a quick little story here. So, a member on our team is a caregiver. She gave me permission to share this story, and she has to travel to Montreal often to take care of her mother. And when she was going there, she was just going to get a hotel because she feels so drained after supporting her mom all day that the last thing she wants to do is go and see her friends. So she told her friends this, and her friends were like, that is so silly. Just come here. You can crash in the basement if you want. You don't even need to talk to us. Just let us support you in this way. And she felt really hesitant at first because she, again, was feeling really disconnected and, just didn't want to connect with anyone. And so she said she often would go to the basement, chill out for a certain amount of time, and eventually, kind of feel like, okay, maybe I might go up and just say hello, and then ended up connecting with her friends. And it's become a beautiful tradition that actually makes her feel nourished and supported during a time where she felt like really lonely and really maxed out and like she didn't have room for that connection, and then realizes she feels so much better after she goes to her friend's house and has those like little moments of connecting. So I wanted to share that story. So some simple ways to connect with your friends. If you only have a couple minutes, honestly, just sending them a meme, a song, a photo that made you think of them, just these little moments and touch points that make you feel connected that don't take a lot of time. If you have 5 minutes, just exchanging voice notes, hopping in a group chat, doing an online quick game together, just a couple moments to share a moment. And also don't discount joining group chats with other caregivers, because sometimes seeing those stories and just being in that community can also make you feel less alone. And then again, if you have about 10 to 30 minutes, looking at, going for a walk, getting a coffee, just having a virtual chat while you're doing something around the house. Next up is the power of colleagues. We know that relationships formed with the people we work with are actually just as meaningful as our friends and families. And for caregivers, connections can really help guard against stress and isolation. Because when you have those people that you can confide in or simply chat with breaks, you're going to be able to better kind of balance that sense of work and caregiving. And we also know that it can really support when you're struggling. So some tips to connect with your colleagues is, number one, to just show up authentically in those small moments. You don't have to connect with everyone at work, but if you have one or two close work friends, that's enough to really give you that sense of connection. Number two is to participate in workplace rituals, even if it's briefly. I'm just thinking we just had a workplace thing the other day, and a bunch of our coworkers had very sick kids and weren't going to come in, and a coworker, encouraged them to even if you just stay for 10 minutes, we'd love to just see you and connect. And it kind of gave them permission to take a few minutes for themselves and just have some fun with the team and remember why they're so valued and cared for. And then number three is to kind of create a buddy system and ask for help. I said, finding that one or two work friends that you can rely on. I know, as I said, we have some caregivers in our work. And so we've kind of buddied up. And when one of us is caregiving or needs support, the other one might watch their emails or, do what we can to support in those small ways. That just helps reduce that sense of burden. Next up is our relationships with our neighbors. We know that people who spend time with their neighbors feel less lonely than those who don't. And for caregivers, that kind of close to home support can make a real difference in day-to-day life. We know that means it could be someone to actually check in on you or your care recipient, help with small tasks like grabbing groceries or shoveling, or again, even just having those quick check-ins of someone who's kind of there if you need something last minute. And so some simple ways to just connect, again, even if you have 2 minutes, just waving and smiling at the people you see outside. It doesn't have to be big. If you have 5 minutes, chatting while you're taking out the garbage, while you're walking the dog, like finding those couple people that might be close by. And then if you have 10 to 30 minutes, just, joining neighborhood events, walking around your neighborhood. And I know for me, when I was supporting with my caregiving journey, making a couple friends with the neighbors next door was really helpful for me. If I was like hey, can you go check on them for like a minute, or I need this, because a lot of people want to help. They just don't always know how. So when you give them those simple ins, it makes it a lot easier to say yes and support. Next up is the power of strangers. We know that talking to strangers at least once a week actually makes us 3 times happier than people who don't, and yet only about 20% of Canadians regularly chat with strangers, even though the research shows that 9 times out of 10 interactions with strangers are actually positive experiences, and that these brief encounters with people actually help to increase our sense of trust, hope, optimism, and happiness, and even our sense of safety in our communities. And so again, remembering that connection doesn't always have to look big. Sometimes, honestly, it can be as simple as smiling at someone, saying hello, and giving them a compliment that can make them feel so much better. I know I practice this every day now, and you can just see people's eyes light up, and then it kind of makes you feel good as well. So finding these little moments when we can. And then last up, the power of community. I think this can be a real game changer, especially for caregivers, because there are a lot of community resources that can support you. We know that libraries, community centers, faith groups, not-for-profits, they can really offer those lifelines specifically designed for caregivers like you by providing either free or super low-cost ways to connect with other people who truly get what you're experiencing. And I know a lot of spaces that can offer peer support groups, free workshops that teach practical skills, social programs built specifically for your reality, whether that's, caregiver coffee hours, walking groups, art classes. And also they're a great way to support resource navigation. And research actually shows that 87% of caregivers in structured programs report stronger social connections, and it can actually help reduce feelings of loneliness and isolation by up to 15%. So it is really helpful to check out our local libraries, community centers, clubs, groups, faith organizations, and amazing not-for-profits like the Ontario Caregiver Organization. So again, some quick tips is number 1, literally just checking a local library or community center website or bulletin board for caregiver events. If you have about 5 minutes, you can call or email one and see what they're actually offering for people. And then if you have between 30 minutes to an hour, actually attending a drop-in program or a structured program to, again, give you that peer support and just take some time for yourself to support yourself and connect with other people who get it. So as we wrap up today, I wanted to leave you with a really concrete tool that you can use to continue prioritizing your connection as you navigate this caregiving experience that you are. And I've adapted this rule. It's by Casley Killam. I've adapted it a bit for caregivers to make it really gentle. And so up first is number 5. So what I want you to think about with this are, what are the 1 or 2 ways that you can really build out your social circle right now? So that might be whether you want to focus on neighborhood support and just having one neighbor that you can rely on, maybe reconnecting with a friend that you really love, who you can talk to anything about. Finding these simple ways of like, who are those couple people in these groups that I can really kind of connect and lean on right now. For number 3, wanting you to think about who are those 1 to 3 core people and those core relationships that can really nourish you and make you feel good and connected right now. I like to think like our ride or die people, the people that we could talk to anything about, who we know have our back. And then finally, for number 1, focusing on just having 1 moment of social connection a day, even if that's just spending 2 minutes meditating and being with yourself. If you can even just do that couple little minutes of self-connection, that matters so much, and it will make a difference over time. And as I said, these little ways of connecting do add up and compound. It doesn't always need to be big. So I know that things get hard and, things get really stressful. So if you're ever feeling stressed out and you're lonely, you don't need to remember all my tips. all you need to do is come back to a very simple mantra, which is to number one, notice that you're feeling lonely and disconnected. Number two, reflect on who and what you need most right now to feel connected. And then number three, to take at least 2 minutes of your day to get reconnected. Notice, reflect, reconnect. Because the reality is we need each other more than ever before in this community. And we really are in this together. And it turns out that the best medicine for people is actually people. So thank you so much for being here and for all the ways that you're supporting the people around you. You are all truly superheroes. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I really hope this presentation helped to remind you that you are so deserving of support and care and nourishing connections while you're, providing all this support for the people around you. We will be sending out a follow-up toolkit for you that summarizes this presentation so, you don't lose anything, and offers some additional resources and kind of a connection menu for, ways to connect when you don't have lots of time. So watch out for that. And if you have a couple minutes, I do have a QR code on the screen with just a couple questions that helps us know how we did tonight and if there's any changes you'd like to see made. So if you have a couple minutes and you can fill that out, it would be much appreciated. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Katie and open it up for some questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bobby. That was fabulous. I loved all those really practical tips and strategies. And folks, if you have questions for Bobby or for OCO, please put those into the chat. We've got lots of time to get through some questions related to you, to your connection with others, or to anything we've shared tonight. I really love, Bobby, how you brought this topic to light, connecting it to social isolation and loneliness. We hear so often that caregiving can be a really lonely experience, that it can be something that we know there's 4.2 million caregivers. That number is growing. There are caregivers in this Zoom today and in our workplaces and in our communities, but it can feel really lonely and really isolating. And so I really appreciated that you brought that linkage in there to connection and why connection is important, because we also can feel really tired. And so the thought of, the example you gave of your colleague of caregiving, driving at a long distance, providing care, and then having to sort of socialize and connect with friends can sometimes feel really daunting. We know we kind of need it, but we're tired. We're really tired. And so I really appreciated those examples. I'm wondering if you have any tips or suggestions for folks who might be feeling that, like, I'm tired, but I know that I need to make this effort to connect with that family member, that friend, that colleague, that person. But I don't want to share my story again. I don't want to keep talking about caregiving. I do it all day long. I think about it all the time. So do you have any thoughts or any tips related to that and how we can sort of build this connection without it being sort of central to our caregiving?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. It's super amazing. And first off, just want to validate the tiredness because I know it's so big, and it kind of reminds me sometimes like when you need to work out and like it's good for you and you'll feel better after you work out, but you're like, this is the last thing I want to do right now. And so I always say, what is the gentlest way that we can approach doing that? And so for me, for example, I know kind of similarly when I was going through my journey and I didn't want to talk about it and I was really tired, I would go through a few steps. First one is that self-connection piece. Sometimes it's really easy for us when we feel super burnt out and exhausted to just do something called auto-regulation, where maybe we just pick up our phone and we're scrolling and watching videos, or we're just doing stuff that kind of distracts us from how we're feeling but doesn't really nourish us and fill us up. So my first tip is always like, if you're feeling that way and you're like, I just don't have the energy to connect with people and I need to kind of like zone out, what is a way that you can actually connect with yourself that's going to be nourishing as opposed to just like drain you more? So, even if it's just starting with, like, as I said, my coworker, she goes to her friend's house and she takes the first half hour to just hang out and like lay in bed in silence and quiet. And then if and when she feels ready, she'll come upstairs and have dinner and they'll have like a nice little chat. And so she's honoring kind of that space and time that she needs first and foremost to be with herself before inviting people in. So I'd say that's one part. And then that other part around how do you connect when maybe you don't want to talk about what you're going through is just practice those gentle ways of simply communicating. I know I've had friends who have been caregivers and they've straight up been like, Bobby, I only have 5 minutes for a phone call. I don't really want to talk about what's going on. Like, can we just chill, or can we do that? And then, it makes it really easy for me as a friend to be like, oh my God, of course, let me send you all these cute memes of like cuddly things to see so you don't have to think about that. Or whatever that process is. So just finding those gentle ways to kind of advocate for what you need, because some people, like I've known friends who are caregivers who just want to call me and vent for 5 minutes and rage. And, I'm cool to hold space for that. And then I've had other friends who are like, I don't want to talk about this at all. Just send me cat gifts, So, again, just finding those little ways to let your friends know, because most people want to support you. And, sometimes people are awkward and they don't know how. And so if you can just gently be like, I really need this right now. Most people who care about you will be like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Or, I can't do that right now, but I might be able to do that later. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that. It really ties back to a lot of advocacy that we have to do as caregivers, and reminding us that we can do some self-advocacy as well, and being able to sort of set the boundaries of what we need in this moment. Maybe I want to tell you everything that happened on the weekend with my care recipient. Maybe I don't. And we have to be able to sort of feel comfortable enough with the people in our space, and the connection we have with those people to be able to set those boundaries and advocate for what we want, instead of, repeating ourselves and just being exhausted by the interaction rather than sort of filling our cup.
Yeah.
And I really liked what you said too. When I was thinking about today's session, I was like, oh, cool, social connections. We're going to talk about like connecting with other people. But I really love how you started off talking about loving the connection with yourself. I don't ever think about it that way. Like, we often think of like self-care, which can be a bad word for some caregivers. We don't love to hear that well-being self-care piece, but it's a really lovely reframe of connecting with yourself, as a part of connection, particularly for those who might really genuinely be isolated. Maybe they live in rural communities. Maybe they don't have family or close friends. Maybe for those caregivers who have been doing this for decades and those friend circles have kind of dissipated and disappeared and people have gone away. There's always us that we can build that stronger connection with and redirect that energy to. So I really appreciated that you shared that as well.
Yeah, I really like to bring that in. Like I did counseling before this, and so I noticed when I would spend all day supporting other people and being there for them, and I would come home to my family, wants to spend time with me, wants to connect, and I needed to advocate and be like, I need a half hour to just like lay in silence and like be with myself right now, because I couldn't show up for them without draining my cup even more after spending all day taking care of others and supporting other people. So I'm always like a massive advocate for, if it feels overwhelming and it feels like these connections are pulling energy from you, what are those ways that you can also create that time with yourself to like also be nourished and fill that up, especially if your connections are requiring a lot of energy being, given out as opposed to like being received in. So yeah, I always think it's really important, like connection with self. And also, I'll just throw that out, I love connecting with pets too. I think sometimes it's a very simple relationship and there's a lot of unconditional love. So sometimes too, like I tell some caregivers and some people, like also if you have a pet and you just need like some cuddles for a few minutes, that's beautiful too.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I sometimes will interact with caregivers and they'll be very deep in their caregiving role, maybe caring for multiple people, and it's very much the center of their life. But then they're thinking about adopting an animal or bringing an animal into their home. And at first you think, why are you taking on this other responsibility? But there's that social connection there and that emotional connection there. And some would say that unconditional sort of love that comes with having a pet in your environment. So, another great example. We had a question in the chat about what can you do if other people, like your friends, for example, are too busy? They're too busy to connect, or if hearing about your life just makes them really uncomfortable and they really just they don't want to hear about what's going on with you. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first I just want to acknowledge how painful that experience can be because obviously our friends usually want to be a source of support and people that we can be really honest and share ourselves with, and it's really difficult and disappointing sometimes when people just don't have the capacity or the time to show up in that way. So totally want to honor that. And I'll share from my own personal experience. I have a bit of a journey with trauma, and so I had a really difficult past. And so when I've been in healing phases, I know for me, I had friends who could not receive my stories, could not be there to support the level of care I needed. And when I shared very vulnerably with those people and they weren't able to hold me, it felt really re-traumatizing and really, really difficult and painful. And so, first and foremost, just want to acknowledge that and say, like, honor that if you're talking to someone and they're not able to hold you in a way that feels good for you, also provide that sense of self-care by, protecting those parts of you that aren't able to be held in that space, as painful as it is, and try to find other people who can. Sometimes for me, that looked like I had to go get a counselor because that counselor was trained and really able to hold space for the level of like deep feeling and things I was moving through in a way that sometimes my friends just couldn't. Or even finding peer support groups, right? Like I know OCO offers some opportunities for that, and there's some other organizations who do, because often those people do get you and they're in that reality too, and they can hold more of that weight of the reality of things that people are going through sometimes because they're living it as well. So, maybe it's finding, like, I've had to learn, if the friendship feels healthy and solid. I know that some of my friends really just need to keep things kind of light and breezy. So I have that friendship for that one thing that we share together and we do together. And that feels really nourishing and good. But I know that I can't bring some of my other parts of me into that connection. So as long as it doesn't feel like it's a toxic connection or relationship, like, bring the parts of yourself that you can bring into there, find what works for that connection, and then try to supplement or bring in other relationships that can meet those depths of you, even if that looks like peer support or counseling, or again, maybe another friend who really gets it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think not every shoe doesn't fit, right? It's, some friends aren't built for those kinds of conversations. And it can be upsetting for them. And I really love your thoughts and suggestions on finding, the space where that particular conversation or that part of you fits best. And maybe that's peer support, maybe that's connecting with, your Alzheimer's Society or another diagnosis specific organization that has people with lived experience. We often hear from caregivers that it's great to talk to people who've walked in their shoes. And sometimes our friends just don't have that lived experience. And so they are not really going to understand truly what we might be feeling or going through on a day to day basis. So I really love that suggestion of like finding the right fit and seeing what works for each person and making sure it fills your cup. That's great. Lots of great comments in the chat here. I love this. Um, Great tips and tools. If there's any final questions for Bobby, we've got another moment. We can fit in one more question. Just going to take a minute to read this story that was shared. I talk to strangers, sticker on my car. Yes. So sometimes we got to talk to strangers. Sometimes we have to be bold and put ourselves out there.
Yeah,
That's
that one
great.
working for GenWell definitely changed my life because I didn't used to do that, and now every day, similarly, we have a Talk to a Stranger Week campaign, which is where that I talk to strangers sticker comes from, and now every day I try to just like say a little compliment to everyone, and you don't think that it will make you feel so good, but it makes you feel so good. Like it's great for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. That might be a really beautiful tip to end on. Maybe talking to strangers is our takeaway today on National Caregiver Day. We don't know who's caregiving. We don't know out there who's taking on these roles and what they need in that moment. And so maybe sharing a quick hello, a quick comment, polite gesture, something kind with a stranger really might turn around that person's day. So I think that's
Actually,
a lovely sentiment.
I'd love to end on this story because I just heard this
Yeah.
story the other day and it totally relates to what we're talking about. So I was talking to a lovely woman from Parkinson's, Canada, and she was sharing a story how a group of her friends were riding to raise awareness for Parkinson's, and they weren't doing it for any fundraising or anything like that. They literally just a group of friends who decided to ride across Canada and connect with people to raise awareness. And so they ended up stopping in this small town somewhere to like refuel, get some snacks. And this woman comes up to him and is like, "Oh my God, what are you doing? Like, do you have Parkinson's?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah," and starts talking to her. And she's like, "Can you wait right here?" And he's like, why?" And she's like, "My brother has Parkinson's and he feels so embarrassed about it and he's stopped leaving the house and he's so isolated, and I just feel like meeting you would change his life and make him realize that he's not alone and he can still connect with other people." And so she ran home and brought her brother out, and they ended up spending like 4 hours chatting about life. And she said that it absolutely changed her brother's life. And he started actually leaving the house again and connecting with other people and getting support. And it was that power of strangers moment, right? Where we have no idea those little ways that we show up and say hi and connect, like what a difference and impact it can make. And so I just wanted to share that because I thought it was such a beautiful, beautiful story of
Oh,
people supporting people.
yeah, that is a beautiful story. And thank you for sharing it. And I think it really ties into what we're talking about today and the power of social connection. And we don't know where it can take us and what kind of impact it can have on others. So I think that's a wonderful story to end us on today. I want to thank you, Bobby. I want to thank you and Jenwell for joining us and sharing all of these wonderful practical tips and strategies and beautiful stories with all of our caregivers today. I want to congratulate Bryna again on a well-deserved Janet Bede Impact Award. So if you're looking for more ways to connect with other caregivers, folks, consider joining one of our online support groups or our one-to-one peer support program. If you want to stay in tune with all things happening at OCO, feel free to sign up to our newsletter to stay up to date on everything coming your way. We hope to see you again another night. Happy Caregiver Day, everyone. Have a great night.